Hello everybody and welcome back to some more Stormworks Build and Rescue. So I've been working on the air system. So we're going to spawn in. I'll be inside my test chamber and I'm going to try and explain what's going on, and then I'll try and go over what I've done for the system. So essentially I have a meter inside. So once the CO2 hits 30, it's going to start to exhaust the tank. It's going to start sucking gas out of the tank. Then what I have is I have an oxygen tank and a nitrogen tank on the roof as well. As the oxygen levels get low and the nitrogen levels get low, it will replace that. It'll shoot in more oxygen and it'll shoot in more nitrogen as the carbon dioxide is draining. Why is that important? Well, what I've discovered is that if you just set up a threshold, say my carbon dioxide is at 30 and I want it to go down to 17, the safe level, it'll just exhaust the gas, but it won't replace it. And that'll create a huge air pressure imbalance between the outside and the inside. This is the outside air pressure, this is the inside air pressure. And when you open the door, if the imbalance is too great, it'll force you outside and it won't allow you to come back inside. Right, you open the door, it'll suck you right out, and that'll be the end. Oh, there it goes. So we hit 30. As you can see, carbon dioxide is being exhausted into our CO2 tank. Okay, we have a nitrogen tank and an oxygen tank on the roof. Now, I'm still sort of tweaking the levels. As the nitrogen goes below 30,000, it'll give us a fresh blast, as you saw there, of nitrogen. Now, that might be a bit too much. 38,000 might be a bit too much. And oxygen is going to do the same thing. When the oxygen gets below a certain amount, it's going to give us a blast, and it's going to refresh that oxygen. So what that does is that allows us to balance the air pressure. So we'll just watch here. This is the internal air pressure. Right? See how now we're starting to get a little bit too low? Saying, oh boy, it's getting really low. How do we solve that? Well, there we go. It just pumped in some oxygen. Should give us a little more nitrogen. Yeah, there we go. We get a little bit more nitrogen. There we go. And it should stop at around 20. Yes, perfect. Now, as you can see, the air pressure is reasonably balanced. We're a little higher pressure inside than we are outside, but we're close. So what would give us that balance essentially now is it's about tweaking the values, right? Tweaking the nitrogen values, tweaking the oxygen values. Obviously, we're replacing a little bit too much of the gas, but we're still pretty close. So finally, I've been able to figure out how to give us a fresh air system in a closed box. All right, so I'm going to show you how it works. The technical mumbo jumbo. So we have 3 tanks here. This is our exhaust tank, and we have a nitrogen tank and an oxygen tank. Okay? As the system draws gases out, it takes away the CO2 and it takes away the oxygen and the nitrogen. So we need to be replacing both the oxygen and the nitrogen. Now I was just replacing the nitrogen, or just the oxygen, and I was noticing there's a huge imbalance in the tanks. I'm like, why is that? Okay. So what I've done here in the microcontroller is I've set up some thresholds. Really easy to understand. This is the gas meter, and we are now reading the values on that gas meter. This is our CO2, this is our oxygen, and this is our nitrogen. And then what I've done is I've just set up numbers in the threshold. So it's going to need to be calibrated, right? So every chamber has like a neutral value, whatever that is. When you walk into it and you read the gas meter, it'll tell you what the neutral amount of oxygen, nitrogen, and CO2 is. So all I'm trying to do is figure out, okay, well, how can I stay within that neutral range, right? What's the high range? What's the low range? So in this specific, every room is going to be different. So I'll have to calibrate every room, and I'm still not too sure how I'm going to do that without editing the microcontroller. But that's essentially it. So I set up a JK flip-flop, and then we have our out to the pumps. So the threshold gate reads the value, and it says, okay, once the CO2 hits 30, turn on. And then this other threshold says, okay, once the CO2 hits 20, turn off. So it'll stop exhausting the tank. Oxygen is the same. I read the neutral oxygen level, and I said, okay, when the oxygen level gets, this low, give us a blast. And when the oxygen level gets this high, stop. And I basically did the same for the nitrogen. I said, okay, when the nitrogen level gets this low, give us a blast. When the nitrogen level gets this high, stop giving us a blast. And that's essentially it. And what I've been able to create is a reasonably balanced internal chamber. So this could be, let's say, a submarine, or this could even be a lower deck on a ship that's closed off, right? Let's say you don't want to have 3 or 4 or 5 open doors into the room where you're working, or you're working in a room that's below the water line, and you don't want to be forcing air down there. So this is the next best thing. You're going to need 3 tanks: a nitrogen tank, an oxygen tank, and an exhaust tank in almost every room, or into almost every room. And and then you want a gas meter, barometer, just all this kind of stuff, right? The air pressure stuff that we set up. I think I set up in my previous videos. Yeah. So essentially that's it. I finally solved it. So what'll happen is the gas meter, the CO2 hits 30. It starts exhausting all the gases from the chamber. And we need to be replacing the oxygen and the nitrogen that it's taking out. And if we're able to do that in a decent way, we'll be able to maintain this balance. So it's still a little bit of a gray area, because obviously the volume of the spaces will change, right? This could be considered I don't even know if this would be a typical room. Like, every ship has bigger rooms and smaller rooms and all that. So that's why I'm saying you'll have to, or I'll have to, unfortunately, test and create a custom system on each vessel. Now, when it comes to very small vessels, unfortunately, there's not much you're going to be able to do. The small ships in that, you'll just have to keep your door open, or a window open, or a hatch, because you just simply don't have the room to have these big tanks. You could have smaller tanks in there, but I just don't know if they're going to have the I'd have to do testing in that. I mean, you could probably scale this down to make this a bit smaller so it fits in the, there's different types of tanks, right? We've got the large tank. I don't know if the small tank will work. It's pretty tiny. The medium tanks, they might work. You could get a whole bunch of these. But I think, honestly, if you're going to go that route, you may as well see if you can fit a large tank, a couple of large tanks in there somewhere into your builds. But yeah, that's essentially it. I finally solved it. So what I'm going to do is I'll load it again. I'll load the here. I'll exit this. I'll load into the game again, and we'll see that one more time, and then I'll post this video. All right, so we'll say load, and we are doing our test. It takes like 10 minutes for the CO2 to go from wherever it is, 18, all the way up to 30. So what I did, I just saved it at about 29 for the purpose of this video. Because I just wanted to show that I was able to reasonably balance. And I mean, that's pretty close. That's pretty balanced. You could open the door. You could go outside. and there isn't enough air pressure inside that it's going to force you out the door. Right, as you can see, we're at 2912. You know, the air pressure is reasonably balanced inside. Okay. So the microcontroller is reading the CO2 value. This is all based on the CO2 value. When the CO2 value gets to a certain amount, we say, hey, that's too high. Let's exhaust the CO2. But at the same time, it's going to be sucking out the oxygen and the nitrogen. So we want to be able to replace the oxygen and the nitrogen, right? And at the same time, we also don't want the air pressure or the pressure inside the chamber to get too low, because if that happens when you open the door, oops, oh no, did I just mess it up? Oh, I did. Oh, well, I'll load it there. If you open the door, it'll suck you out, right? If the air pressure is too high. So now the system isn't perfect, and the system will need to be tweaked depending on where and how you use it. Again, this is based on this specific volume in this specific tank. Bigger tanks with more volume, the pressure could be different. I'm not sure. I'm simply just showing you the setup, the way I've set it up. And then it'll be up to you to test like I'm doing now. Spawn it in, test the values. Spawn it in, test the values. You know, it'll take a day. But this way you can be in your big ship. You can be in your tanker. You can be in your submarine. You can be below the water. You can be on the water. And you don't necessarily have to have a window that's open, right? And you don't have to be in your spacesuit or your survival suit. You can just be walking around comfortable inside the chamber, right? You're breathing air. You're not suffocating. So we'll show that one more time. So we have our CO2 tank. This is our nitrogen, and this is our oxygen. And then this is our air balance system here, which does, I notice it does eventually balance, but of course the pressure doesn't balance. So this balances, but this doesn't balance. Why? I don't know. I don't know why when you have a vent going out and a vent going in, that if it's sucking out gas and forcing gas in, these pressures should be the same, but it's obviously not equal. It's, in my opinion, it's something that they should look at. Okay, so we hit 30, right? Carbon dioxide is going into this tank, it's sucking out the CO2. And you'll see as the nitrogen gives, we're losing oxygen and nitrogen. And that's causing the pressure in the tanks to drop. So now what we do is we give it a blast of nitrogen. You see that? We're now up to 37,000. And that gave us more pressure. And we need more pressure because we're still exhausting the oxygen or the carbon dioxide. The next one will probably be oxygen. But what this does, this will make it so the oxygen levels don't go too low and the nitrogen levels don't go too low, and then we're able to stay reasonably balanced. Oh yeah, reasonably balanced inside the chambers, as you can see. So now we're lowering the CO2, we're making it safe to breathe. We're keeping the pressure reasonably equal inside. There we go. Look at that pressure. It'll balance. It's so balanced. Little bit of pressure, but nothing like what it was. And then if you open the door, it's not gonna. You can still come in and out, right? It's not gonna force you out like it was before, right? If I turn on the tank, let's see. If I go, is it this one here? Oh no. I had a tank in here that was forcing in air, and when it's turned on, you can't actually walk through the door because there's so much air coming in, right? So yeah, so thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. I hope you found this short video informative. Watch the other one that I have there, which is just the air tests. It'll show you how I set up the box and how I set up the CO2 meter with the composite. This video here just simply shows the other system. One tank of nitrogen, one tank of oxygen, and an exhaust tank, which we draw all the gases into, and then we replace those gases. So the next test that I'll probably do later on this week will be to determine if should I draw all the gas out first, get the CO2 to a safe level, which will give us a huge imbalance in the air pressure, and then replace the oxygen and the nitrogen to try and rebalance the pressure inside the chamber. That to me makes a little more sense than this, because in this specific case, you'll have to tweak it. Every time you put this on a build, you'll have to adjust the values, and that could just be a little more difficult. So yeah, so one of those two things, I'll set up the other way, the other chamber, and I'll put it here, and then I'll test both of them, and I will post the results. But thank you so much for watching. And again, yes, this is how we want to set up our fresh air system inside our ships. Well, I hope you're enjoying your Sunday. Bye-bye for now.